Welcome to Sage-Adek, the place where stories come alive. Whether you're here to escape, to be inspired, or to simply enjoy a great tale, you're in for something special. Each story is crafted to entertain, intrigue, and leave you wanting more. So sit back, relax, and let the journey begin. Ethan's face paled. He had hoped to tell Sophie the truth on his own terms, but now that hope was gone. He stammered, searching for the right words, but Sophie wasn't waiting. "I looked you up," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You're not just a security guard, you're a billionaire CEO. Why did you lie to me? Was this some kind of sick game? Were you just testing me?" "Sophie, no, it's not like that," Ethan said, stepping forward. But Sophie stepped back, her eyes filled with betrayal. "Then what is it like, Ethan? You've been lying to me this entire time. I trusted you. Was anything about us real?" Ethan's chest tightened. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to find someone who loved me for me, not for my money or my status. That's why I didn't tell you. You should have trusted me enough to tell the truth," Sophie shot back, tears brimming in her eyes. "You made me feel like a fool." "My feelings for you are real," Ethan pleaded. "I love you, Sophie." But Sophie shook her head. "I need time to think," she whispered, turning away. Ethan reached out, but she was already walking out the door, leaving him standing there, shattered. For days, Ethan tried to reach out to Sophie, but she ignored his calls and messages. Meanwhile, his business was spiraling out of control. The multi-million-dollar deal that could make or break you enterprises was slipping through his fingers, and his board was growing increasingly frustrated. Ethan's main competitor, Kingsley Industries, had taken full advantage of his distraction. They sabotaged you enterprises by spreading false information, stealing clients, and undermining key deals. At a heated board meeting, Ethan faced the full wrath of his shareholders and even his father, who was also a board member. "This is unacceptable, Ethan," his father said sternly. "You've let the company slide into chaos because of your absence. Focus on the business or you'll regret it." Ethan clenched his fists under the table. The accusations stung, but he knew they weren't wrong. He had let his personal life interfere with his professional duties, and now both were falling apart. Ethan packed his belongings and returned to his corporate life, determined to salvage what remained of his empire. Yet his heart still ached for Sophie. As he worked tirelessly to restore his company's reputation, he vowed to fix things with her, if she would ever give him the chance. But Kingsley's sabotage had left deep scars, and rebuilding you enterprises wouldn't be easy. Ethan was prepared to fight for the company and the woman he loved. What he didn't know was that Sophie was struggling too, caught between her anger at Ethan's deception and the undeniable feelings she still had for him. Would Ethan be able to save his company and win back Sophie's trust? Or had his secret cost him everything he held dear? Ethan Cole sat in his office, staring at the angry faces of his board members. The once unshakable confidence he held as the founder of U Enterprises now felt like a distant memory. "You've let this company slide into chaos, Ethan," said one of the shareholders, a particularly vocal critic. "If this continues, we'll have no choice but to replace you as CEO." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. The idea of being removed from the company he had built from the ground up was unthinkable. He clenched his fists under the table, his voice trembling as he replied, "That's not going to happen. I'll fix this, I'll turn it around." But as the meeting ended, Ethan couldn't shake the sinking feeling that time was running out. Kingsley Blake, his rival, had taken advantage of his absence, sabotaging deals and luring clients away. Now, even his own company seemed to be turning against him. Meanwhile, Sophie Turner faced her own storm. Her father's health, which had briefly improved, was deteriorating again. The hospital had reached out to Ethan, unaware of the tension between him and Sophie. They informed him of the urgent need for additional treatment. Despite their estrangement, Ethan couldn't abandon Sophie's family. Quietly, he arranged for the hospital bills to be paid, ensuring her father received the best care. He kept his involvement a secret, not wanting to complicate matters further. Though Sophie wasn't speaking to him, Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of their broken relationship. He longed to fix things but hesitated, haunted by the memory of her anger and betrayal. One late evening, as Ethan exited his office, He noticed someone waiting for him by the entrance. It was Vanessa Blake, Sophie's close friend. Known for her sharp tongue and disapproval of Ethan, her presence surprised him. "Vanessa? What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, puzzled. Vanessa smiled, stepping closer. "I've been thinking, Ethan. Now that I know who you really are, I see things differently." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Vanessa placed a hand on his arm, her eyes glinting with ambition. "You're not just a security guard, you're a powerful CEO, one of the most successful men in the country. Sophie's a fool for walking away from you." Ethan stiffened, pulling his arm away. "What are you getting at, Vanessa?" She tilted her head, her voice dripping with charm. "You deserve someone who appreciates everything you have to offer. Someone like me. I've always admired you, Ethan, even before I knew who you really were. We'd make a great team." The realization hit Ethan like a slap. Vanessa wasn't interested in him, she was interested in his wealth and power. She was the very embodiment of the superficiality he had hoped to escape. "I'm not interested," Ethan said firmly. "I care about Sophie. She's the one who sees the real me, not the billionaire." Vanessa's expression soured. "Sophie? She's been ignoring you for weeks. Why waste your time on someone who doesn't even want you?" Ethan shook his head, his resolve unwavering. "I'm only interested in Sophie, Vanessa. And nothing's going to change that." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, leaving Vanessa standing in the cold. As Ethan battled to save his company, another complication arose. Kingsley Blake, his cunning competitor, had taken an interest in Sophie. Their paths crossed through the principal of the school where Sophie worked. "Sophie, I'd like you to meet my nephew, Kingsley," the principal said warmly one afternoon. "He's been looking for someone special, and when I mentioned you, he was very eager to meet you." Sophie smiled politely, though she hadn't thought much of it at first. Kingsley was charming, always impeccably dressed, and made no effort to hide his admiration for her. "You're a breath of fresh air, Sophie," he said during their first meeting. "Your simplicity and kindness are rare in a world like mine." At first, Sophie dismissed his words as harmless flattery, but Kingsley persisted. He began showing up at school events, sending her thoughtful messages, and even helping out with her father's medical needs. Slowly, Sophie found herself caught between the lingering feelings she had for Ethan and the growing attention from Kingsley. With Ethan fighting to save his company, Vanessa scheming to win him over, and Kingsley's growing influence on Sophie, the stakes were higher than ever. Would Ethan be able to reclaim his company and Sophie's heart, or would his past decisions cost him everything he held dear? It didn't take long for Sophie Turner to notice how openly Kingsley Mina flaunted his wealth and success. What started as subtle admiration quickly turned into bold gestures. Lavish gifts appeared at her doorstep, invitations to exclusive events were extended, and offers to alleviate her family's financial burdens flowed freely. Her friends and colleagues couldn't stop talking. Whispers filled the hallways at work, envious of Sophie's newfound attention. To the outside world, Kingsley was everything a woman could want: charming, wealthy, and attentive. But for Sophie, the situation was far more complicated. Deep down, she still had feelings for Ethan Cole. Despite the lies he had told and the pain he had caused, she couldn't forget the man who had once swept her off her feet. Yet, Kingsley represented a life of security and stability, everything her friends and family had always told her she needed. One evening, Kingsley invited Sophie to an exclusive, high-end restaurant for dinner. She hesitated, unsure of her feelings, but ultimately accepted. Maybe this was her chance to clear her head and figure out what, or who, she really wanted. The restaurant was stunning, its tables adorned with elegant arrangements and soft candlelight. Kingsley, as always, exuded confidence. From the moment they sat down, his attention was solely on her. "You know, Sophie," Kingsley began, his voice smooth and practiced, "I've met many women in my life, but none quite like you. You're genuine, kind, and humble. Those qualities are so rare these days." Sophie smiled politely, but inside she felt conflicted. On the surface, Kingsley seemed perfect, successful, generous, and thoughtful. Yet, something felt off. There was a spark missing, a connection she couldn't quite find with him. As their conversation continued, Kingsley shifted the topic to her family. "I know things have been tough for you," he said, leaning in slightly, "especially with your father's health. I'd like to help." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. His words hung in the air, laced with meaning. "I have the means to take care of your father's medical bills," Kingsley continued casually, as if it were a minor favor. "I don't want you or your family to struggle anymore." For a moment, Sophie froze. Could Kingsley have been the one secretly paying her father's hospital bills all along? The thought settled in her mind, and suddenly, everything seemed to make sense. "Was it you?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Were you the one paying for my father's medical bills?" Kingsley hesitated, just for a moment, but then he smiled and leaned back in his chair. "I didn't want to say anything," he said smoothly, his tone practiced. "But yes, I've always admired you, Sophie, and I wanted to help in any way I could. I didn't want to see you or your family suffer." Relief and gratitude washed over Sophie. For the first time, she began to see Kingsley in a different light. He seemed genuine, generous, and willing to support her in ways Ethan hadn't. But even as she warmed to Kingsley, a part of her remained restless. She couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. His sincerity, his vulnerability, and the connection they had shared before everything fell apart. Her heart felt torn. Kingsley was offering her a life of stability and comfort, while Ethan had shown her a glimpse of something real, something raw. As she looked across the table at Kingsley's confident smile, she couldn't help but wonder if she was making the right choice. Sophie was at a crossroads, torn between two men who represented entirely different futures. One offered security, and the other, the possibility of true love. And deep down, she knew the choice she made would change her life forever. At the hospital, Sophie's father was steadily improving, thanks to the continued anonymous payments. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan had been the one quietly footing the bills, but Kingsley was more than happy to let her believe it was his doing. As Sophie's feelings for Kingsley grew more complicated, so did the pressure from her family. Her mother, Sarah Turner, was particularly insistent. "He's a good man, Sophie," Sarah said one evening, her tone imploring. "He can take care of us. Your father's health may be improving, but we still need help. And Kingsley has been so kind." Sophie was torn. Kingsley represented security, wealth, influence, and the promise of a stable future. He had offered to help her family without hesitation, seemingly asking for nothing in return. Yet, her heart stubbornly clung to Ethan, despite his lies and the pain he had. Sensing Sophie's hesitation, Kingsley decided to take matters into his own hands. One evening, he visited her family's modest home. Dressed impeccably as always, he spoke with a confidence that filled the room. "I care deeply for Sophie," Kingsley said, addressing her parents as they sat on the worn living room couch. "And I want to take care of her, and your family. I have the means to ensure you'll never have to worry about money again. All I ask is that you consider my proposal." The offer was tempting, and Sophie's parents were impressed. After years of financial struggles, the thought of Kingsley providing stability was hard to resist. "He's offering us a way out, Sophie," her father, Robert, said later that evening, his voice weakened from his recent health battles. "You need to think about the future, for yourself and for us." But Sophie's heart was far from convinced. Kingsley made sense on paper. He was stable, honest, and generous. Yet, every time she looked at him, her thoughts drifted back to Ethan, the man who had lied about his identity but had always been genuine about his feelings for. Across town, Ethan's secret double life had become public knowledge. What started as a private experiment had spiraled out of control, and now his decision to live as an ordinary man and fall for someone like Sophie had made waves in the business world. His parents were furious. Ethan's father, Charles Cole, a towering figure in both business and their family, called an emergency meeting. His mother, Evelyn, paced the room, her frustration evident. "You've jeopardized everything we've built," Charles said, his tone ice cold. "Do you even realize what you've done? Your reputation is in shambles, your company is on the verge of collapse, and now you're entangled with a woman from a lower-class background. Have you completely lost your mind?" Ethan sat silently, absorbing the weight of their words. Evelyn, her voice sharp, chimed in. "You've embarrassed this family, Ethan. We groomed you to carry on our legacy, not tarnish it by living like a beggar. And now, you Enterprises is barely staying afloat because of your foolish choices." Charles leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Here's what's going to happen. You will end this relationship with Sophie immediately and marry someone from a respectable, wealthy family. Someone who can strengthen our business alliances. If you don't, we'll cut you off from the company and from the family fortune. Do you understand?" Ethan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Before now, he had been entirely self-sufficient, but with his company on the brink of collapse and his father holding significant influence on the board, he was trapped. "You can't force me to marry someone I don't love," Ethan said quietly, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. Charles's gaze hardened. "Watch us." Meanwhile, Sophie's family pressure was reaching its peak. Her father's health had stabilized for now, but the financial burden was immense. Kingsley's proposal offered an escape, a chance for her family to finally find stability. "You need to think about the future, Sophie," her father said one evening, his voice weak but steady. "Kingsley's a good man, and he's willing to help us. You have to make a decision." Caught between the expectations of her family and the desires of her own heart, Sophie felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. Kingsley was offering her the life she had always dreamed of for her family, a life without struggle or worry. But every time she thought about accepting his proposal, her mind drifted back to Ethan. Despite his lies, there was something undeniable about their connection. Something real. As Sophie and Ethan faced mounting pressures from their families, their worlds were on a collision course. Both had to make impossible choices, but one thing was certain: their decisions would change everything. After her emotionally charged meeting with Ethan, Sophie returned home feeling overwhelmed. Her heart was heavy with the weight of his words, but as she approached the front door, she noticed something unusual. Standing in the living room, surrounded by her family, was Kingsley. He had brought flowers and a gift, and her parents were beaming with pride. The room was filled with a sense of expectation, and Sophie's pulse quickened as Kingsley turned to her, his smile confident. "Sophie, I've been waiting for you," he said, stepping forward. Before she could process what was happening, Kingsley took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee. Sophie's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a sparkling diamond ring. "Sophie," Kingsley began, his voice steady and sincere, "I care deeply for you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Marry me, and I'll make sure you and your family are always taken care of. You'll never have to worry again." The room fell silent. Sophie's mother, Sarah, looked at her with wide, hopeful eyes. Her father, Robert, gave her an approving nod, his frail hands clasped together in anticipation. Even her younger siblings seemed to hold their breath, waiting for her to say yes. This was everything her family had dreamed of, a stable, secure life without financial struggles. Kingsley was offering her not just a future but a way to ease the burdens that had weighed on her family for so long. And yet, Sophie's heart was elsewhere. Her mind flashed back to Ethan's tearful confession at the park. Despite his lies, despite the complications, she couldn't deny the connection they shared. Ethan had laid his heart bare, telling her he loved her and that she was the only person who had ever truly seen him. But Kingsley was here now, offering her everything she and her family needed. Stay tuned for the continuation of this thrilling tale. You won't believe what happens next. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want me to continue, please give it a thumbs up and type "continue the story" in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when the continuation drops. Thank you once again, and I'll see you in the next part.